This episode of The Edge is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and help Trek.fm at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the nonprofit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org. And if you want to join the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode, join the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
You're listening to Trek FM.
What have you done out there on the edge of Federation space?
Hello and welcome to the final episode of Tracks from the Edge, at least for now. I'm Mike.
I'm Max.
And today we are going to be offering up our commentary for episode 15 of season 1 of Star Trek Discovery, Will You Take My Hand? So, for those people who are unaware, this is an audio commentary which you can play in sync with the episode. You can listen to us talk about the episode while you're watching the episode. If you're not watching the episode, as long as you've seen the episode, you really don't have to worry about anything. You'll be able to pick up on what we're talking about for the majority of the program. But if you do want to watch along with us, we're going to give a countdown and tell you when we're going to be starting up this show after the distributor logo in the front of the episode. That would be the CBS All Access logo in America, or the Netflix logo in other parts of the world, or the Crave logo in Canada. And we're going to be doing that, pressing the play on that button there.
Pressing the play on that button.
Just a few seconds. Max?
Yeah.
Will you take my hand and do this one last commentary with me?
Sure.
Okay. Actually, let go of my hand for a second so that you can pick up the remote on your thingy so that we can press play here. And then all right. We'll take each.
We'll take each other's hands again. All right.
Okay. All right. Ready? 3, 2, 1, start. Oh, and look at that. Previously on Star Trek Discovery, but now it's in Klingon. I like that. That's cute. You know?
Yep.
Brings it full circle. Because the first thing started off and it was in Klingon and all that good stuff. So, okay.
It's true.
Getting some backstory on all this stuff that happened, and Ash Tyler's relationship with Michael Burnham, which is troubling now, and the whole shady deal that the Federation has with Empress Georgiou from the Mirror Universe, and what that's going to mean. Right. So, as is the case with many people in the Mirror Universe, although not as many as we may have thought in the past, but I don't know. It's interesting. Like, I was watching, coincidentally, Mirror Mirror this week, and, Spock plays a prominent role in there, and it's like, how much of this was retconned in DS9? I don't know. But anyway, you've got this Battlestar Galactica style, like chatter, which is great, which I guess is Star Wars style chatter. And then this great shot where you see the Klingons, and then we zoom in past the various planets in our solar system until we end up with Earth, which is a great shot. And you got that old school, like, TOS movie era space station there, and then the wipe to Kronos as we pull back. It's just, it's elegant. It's an elegant way into this here story. I like it. Anyway.
Do you like it, though?
I like it. Akiva Goldsman directed this. And
all right.
Anyone who knows me knows how much I like Batman Forever. I like that shot as much as I like Batman Forever. So there you go. It's the Batman Forever of shots.
It's the Batman Forever of establishing shots?
Discovery. There you go. It's the Batman Forever of establishing shots, and that's a high compliment in my book.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay. You should tweet that.
So here we have Emperor Giorgio. Here's the thing, right? Like, first off, I'm surprised that Admiral Cornwell didn't stay on board here. I mean, maybe she knew.
Yeah. She wanted to get as far away from this mess as possible.
She's like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Let's do that. You guys should totally do that. I'll be over here. No, I mean, but that that is kind of how it feels, right? I mean,
oh, that's for sure how it is. Like, she's like, yeah, go kill everyone on this planet. Yeah, go ahead and do it. I'm not going to like say anything on the record about it, but it's totally cool, you guys. It's fine.
It's like
no, it's of course she got off the ship because she didn't want to be directly implicated.
It's like, poke the bear and run, poke the tardigrade and run. So yeah, I mean, but here, it's interesting because I mean you could say that Giorgio is kind of a loose cannon or whatever, and maybe she isn't fully aware of how Giorgio in the Prime universe would be seen, but I really get the impression that she's more of the mindset of I don't give a crap. Like, if this does all blow up, like, yes, okay, we're playing a little game here, and if I don't want them to know that I'm Empress Giorgio, but like if they find out, really, who cares? Because chances are everyone's going to die anyway. You know what I mean? Like, I get the impression that that's kind of her attitude with this whole thing.
Yeah, she's definitely like not hiding being a different like oh, that's how I like to run, dark. That's my thing, like, let's not call them the Klingon homeworld. Let's call it the enemy planet, because I'm not really trying all that hard to blend in. She's, it's so crazy. This whole Mirror Giorgio in charge of the Discovery plot is nuts.
It is. And, I mean, but it's interesting. Well, I don't know. We'll get to this in a little bit. I don't know. There's one thing about it which I find to be amazing, which someone mentioned on Twitter, which I'm just like, oh my God, and it blew my mind. But we'll get to that in a little bit. But, I don't know. There's, I mean, I guess, the whole thing is like desperate times call for desperate measures, and sometimes we cross the line and, all that stuff. But there's like certain things where you would think that they would take a bit more of a precaution, and maybe they couldn't. Maybe there's just no way of going about it. But like, for example, when she, locks herself in the cell with Laurel, and then she's like, okay, computer, my voice authorization only. Like, you would think that, like Starfleet Command would be like, okay, but Saru, we're going to just give you the authority to override her command just in case everything does blow up in our faces, But so this opening sequence here, I just read a review. Where? Oh, yes, it was Matt Zoller Seitz, I think, who is... I find that guy fascinating. Like, he's one of my favorite critics because he does a lot of movies and TV. I think he actually runs Roger Ebert's site now. But, he's written books about, like, Mad Men and I think The Sopranos and stuff like that. And, he's very much sort of a hoity-toity film critic, right? And television critic, in the traditional sense. And he, just released his review of Star Trek Discovery, which he thought was, a very good show, and he talks a lot about, sort of like the criticism that people have of it and everything like that. But one of the things which he talks about, which I found to be kind of interesting, was that, in a lot of ways, since this is a prequel and everything, it's kind of offering up the blueprint of Star Trek. And that's reflected in the main title sequence, and that, we're seeing sort of like the blueprint of all of these iconic things, or things which will become iconic. And I don't know, it sort of works on that level too. I had never thought of it that way, and maybe that's someone just reading too much into a cool design or something like that. But I thought it was an interesting analysis.
Well, I mean, the schematic aesthetic is it's solid, and it's a good way of making a poster. There are plenty of images from that opening sequence that could be made into posters, and they would look really good. And I think that's probably the stronger influence there.
That could be, and actually, they're not posters, but they actually. I just ordered a shirt which has it just says like Star Trek Discovery, but it's got that kind of. I don't think it's an exact frame from the title sequence, but it's got that sort of like schematic design. This scene here, I find this scene to be really interesting for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that it kind of reinforces our friend Zach's theory that 24 takes place in the mirror universe. Mm-hmm. This is something which he's discussed with us on numerous occasions, and we've discussed with other people on numerous occasions. And Brandon Shea Mutala actually brought up to Manny Koto himself, and Manny Koto was like, "I like that works." And on 24, basically all they're doing when they interrogate people is torturing them, and Here you got a mirror universe person who's doing the same thing. And, of course, bringing it all into thematics and everything, it doesn't work. And how do we actually get the info? By sitting and talking to someone and listening to what they have to say. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
You know what's not cool? You know what really freaks me out? Those moving pictures. And I don't mean like, theatrical motion pictures. I mean the pictures that he has there, which are supposed to be still, which are moving. And they have sound effects too. I imagine that would be really annoying.
I'd just like to point out that when he said it ties me to my past, I wanted to turn off the show and not do this.
Okay, you know what?
I wanted to burn a lot of things. I wanted to destroy the Klingon homeworld.
See, that sounds like something I would say, to be honest. So, Okay, back when they announced that Shazad Latif was playing Lieutenant Tyler, who was a POW who they came across at some point in time, from another ship. Of course, given the time period and everything, my first thought was, oh, Lieutenant Jose Tyler from the USS Enterprise? That could be really interesting. Why not do that? And then, they're like, oh, his name is Ash. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess it's not him. So, and then recently, it was revealed that the reason why he's named Tyler is because one of the assistants in the writer's room's name is Tyler DiNucci. And when they were trying to come up with a name for this character, he's like, you guys should call him Tyler. And then they did. So, there was no connection necessarily to be made to the original series. But now that, spoilers, the Enterprise is there and there is Lieutenant Jose Tyler on board, I wonder if they are going to try to tie that in some way or another. Because, everything's got to be tied into everything else in some way or another, right? It's Star Trek.
Is that the way it works? Okay, fine. Yeah. It's going to come up. Sure. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. He's like my third cousin or something. Oh, but you never actually met the actual guy. That's cool.
Okay, so here we are. Here's Tilly. This scene is amazing. Actually, her entire performance in this episode is amazing. Mary Wiseman's comic timing is so good, it's not even funny. You know what I mean?
Yeah, she's awesome. I mean, she was my favorite right from the beginning, and I'm good at that. I picked the right characters.
But she kicks it up another 3 or 4 quads per channel in this episode. You know, I mean, this scene right here is hilarious, and it works so well. I don't know.
I thought it was kind of ridiculous that she didn't know that this was Mirror Georgia. I mean, that's just nuts. Come on.
I get the impression that she's rather naive, you know? I mean, I'm sure that like after that little, back and forth on the bridge, I'm sure the entire bridge crew is like, is she Mirror Giorgio? This shot right here. I mean, it's just your typical, like, let's see a bunch of, badasses all lined up in a row walking down a, corridor shot. But it's so well done the way it like starts off and it's out of focus, and then they rack focus as they're walking through the door, and they've all got their cool, civilian clothing things going on, which I love that too, because like if you look at Burnham's outfit, it's very, very reminiscent of what Uhura wears when she goes down to Kronos into darkness. And I don't think that that's a coincidence. There are a few JJ references throughout the show, but in this episode in particular, there's 2 just sort of like visual cues, which makes sense, that being one of them. The other one comes towards the end. Yeah,
that's great. I love the Into Darkness references.
You know what? Screw you. Into Darkness is awesome. So that's the hill I will die on. In my Star Trek fandom, it's that Into Darkness is not only a good movie but a great movie. So you know what?
I do know what.
There you go. Okay, so here we are going into Kronos. And it's weird to me that Kronos would give, the Klingons would give a piece of Kronos to the Orions.
I mean, like, it's the kind of thing, like, when they say, like, oh, the Orions have a place, like, my first thought was, like, what? That seems nuts. And then I was, like, I thought about it, and I was like, no, it's actually pretty reasonable. I mean, it is a planet, like, it's a whole world. There's a lot of space, and the idea that like they don't have any other aliens on that planet is absurd. And the idea that like some of the other aliens that are there would be from the Orion Syndicate, like that kind of checks out. Because I mean, those are some shady dudes, and those are the kind of guys you'd go to if you wanted to get some illicit weapons. And illicit weapons is the kind of thing that Klingons would be into.
Yeah. I guess so. That does make sense.
It seems to make sense. Like once I thought about it for a while, like it is kind of like it's such a shady neighborhood. like it's so typically like like Pirates Port kind of like aesthetic that like it's almost implausible that it hasn't like blown up at this point. But whatever, I guess. You walk in and you get held up, whatever. I guess
Tilly just pointed a gun at that woman's face and no one around her even batted an eye. So I guess that is kind of how it goes. Another great, Tilly scene there. And I mean, very sort of like telling of her character. Like she's really good at, this sort of like threatening banter, I mean, not only that, but it's also very witty. You know what I mean? It's not just threatening, but it's witty. Like, you'll be smelling the back of your head, or whatever. I mean, that's good, I imagine it would take a while to come up with that off the top of your head, but it's like, she's like Spider-Man. She's like the Spider-Man of Discovery. I don't know.
You should tweet that too. And then 6 tweets to explain it.
Okay, I'll do that.
Okay.
Bread and circuses. I wonder if that was a intentional reference.
Here's the thing. I had to explain that line to my wife. And after I explained it, I was like, wait, that line didn't really make sense in context. like it kind of comes out of nowhere. Like, no time for bread and circuses. It's like, what? That's not what's happening. Whatever.
Maybe she meant no time to watch the original series episode Bread and Circuses.
I guess, like, I mean, like, how come Lorca didn't say, like, oh yeah, I had one tribble and now I've got 6? That is the trouble with tribbles.
He did say context is for kings, which I've got to think is, I mean, there's a lot of titles like The Wolf Inside, I mean, I don't know. I can't believe that that's a coincidence, a lot of those things, but magic to make the sanest man go mad is kind of similar to the magics of Magus 2. I don't know. There's, you know what I mean? There's a lot of like little,
I mean, like they're in like a giant cave, on Kronos. I mean, that world is hollow. They haven't touched any skies though.
They could have used that as the title for this, couldn't they?
They could have used it.
This, I mean, for the record, this is probably like October of 2257. And the show started, so the war started in like May of 2256. So, whatever that means.
Okay. Yeah. So, that's a thing.
Mm-hmm. This would be after The Cage, but 8 years before Where No Man Has Gone Before, or something like that. So, okay, here's the gambling scene where we get to see. We see what sort of triggers Burnham's PTSD from when she was a kid, and then that leads into sort of like the story of exactly how her parents died. And the thing that I find interesting about this personally is that tale was told in the David Mack book that came out, at the start of the season. So, and since that is so tied into, the writing of the show and everything like that, mm-hmm. Like, I don't feel like this was necessarily supposed to be a reveal or a big reveal. It was just, I mean, it's something that a lot of people watching would have already known about. But I do like the fact that it does tie in so well, and it also brings in some interesting questions because, like, as we get to the end of the episode, I was kind of thinking, like,
oh, it's this dude.
It's Clint Howard. Hey. I was kind of thinking, like, I wonder if, in season 2...
That dude is an original series reference.
He is. Yes, he is. But like, I wonder if they're going to, like, rewrite, essentially, what was done in the book. But I kind of think they're not. I don't know. Be interesting to see.
Yeah, this is like part of like there's a school of thought on like how exposition is handled. Like there's a thought that all the exposition should be like present in a way that is unobtrusive, and any information that is required should be given to the audience in a way that is palatable and in context and makes sense. This is not an example of doing that particularly well. I don't really have a problem with the idea of it missing information. I'm totally cool with that notion, and I actually think that it's good for something with the intention of being big and open-ended and having many different paths and many different stories. I mean, Lord of the Rings is a good example of something that has so much missing information that you could make, many movies and books and TV shows about all the stuff that you don't see. And this thing being missing, like, I did find it kind of weird that like we never saw like anything, we never heard any information about her parents' death. And like you had some confusion early on with like the attack where like Sarek is there and like he mind melds with her and like wait, that's not the one where her parents were killed. And it's like I was like, well, yeah, she's on Vulcan, and I was like, but like I guess we still haven't seen that, and it's kind of weird that she's got so many traumas. But like I don't have a problem with it, but I did find it super awkward. It did seem to kind of come out of nowhere. Like, we just needed Burnham in this moment to suddenly be uncomfortable with Tyler again. Like, we forgot that she should be uncomfortable with him because, he did try to kill her.
I think, I don't know. I think it's more of like just her on this world to kind of like to show how she's like, just kind of to hit home the idea, because since it wasn't like, something which was explicit throughout the show, that this is basically her origin, is that her parents were killed by Klingons. I mean, yes, it has been mentioned, but it hasn't been like explicitly dwelt upon. I don't know. Anyway, so like the idea that now she's here on Kronos, and she is like surrounded by her biggest trauma, I guess. I think that's. I mean, it makes sense that we take a little breather here for a second, so that she can sort of like not come to terms with it, but have a moment of freaking out. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I don't know. I'm okay. I'm okay with it in this. I mean, part, just the whole, anytime anyone stops to tell a story in anything, it's usually like, oh, okay. I mean, and maybe not necessarily on first viewing, but on second or third viewing, it's like, how long is it going to take to tell this story? And that's true of like any movie, really, And
all I know is that I flash back to Gremlins, where Phoebe Cates like stops the movie to describe the death of her father on Christmas.
I've only seen that movie once, so I don't.
It's not important, but her father dies in a chimney. And it's such a weird moment where, like, in the middle of a bunch of stuff, she's like, "Oh, I really hate Christmas," and I'm going to spend 5 minutes explaining why.
So we do see the Klingon tattoo artist and stuff like that here, and I guess this does kind of get into something which, I mean, this series kind of promised in some ways that we didn't really get to see too much of, which is the idea of presenting the Klingons as sort of like a working culture, where, I mean, there's always that sort of like thought, and it's the way that these races are kind of like presented on Star Trek, where they are supposed to be kind of like almost archetypal in some ways or whatever, where it's like, Klingons are warriors, and that's like their role on the series. And at some point, you got to stop and think like, okay, all Klingons are warriors. So then, who built that ship? Who sewed that outfit? And obviously, in order for the society to function, you've got to have people who do things other than join the military, right, or whatever it is. And here we get to see a little bit of that, with a Klingon tattoo artist and all that stuff. But I don't know. It would be cool to see more of that, at some point down the line.
Yeah, you reference things very frequently, like stuff that was expected for Star Trek Discovery, and like stuff that you knew about the show before the show started. Like, you seem to have spent like a lot of time before the show aired reading about this show. Like, I
did. It was a very weird case. I mean, it was for this podcast, though. I mean,
yeah. And I spent like all that time thinking, yeah, Star Trek Discovery is coming up at some point, and then I would ask you, when is that thing happening? And you would say, nobody knows.
She just, well, Tilly just discovered the info about the bomb and all that good stuff, and the idea that these guys are all being played, and that goes back to something which I was thinking of earlier, when you have like Burnham, Giorgio, and Tyler all sitting in that map room, like looking at this thing and trying to figure out how to do this. Like, it really is a scenario in which, on the surface and by the Federation's account and everything, like, the fate of this war is going to be decided by 3 people who are not in any official capacity, in terms of like either side, and I don't know, it's kind of an interesting little thing.
Well, like there was a point during this episode where I thought, okay, if they're doing what I think they're doing, then every criticism I have is gone. Because if what they're doing is that the Starfleet signs off on a mission to obliterate the population of Kronos and like end the war by basically killing most of the Klingons in the galaxy, and the way that it doesn't happen is that Burnham mutinies again, but like with like a ship full of people who are all like behind her, then like that would be so awesome. That would be so great.
But that is essentially what happens. I mean, that's what's happening in this scene right here. I mean, and maybe that speaks to this episode on the whole. It wasn't like, grab your phasers and let's do this, I mean, it's just a whole bunch of people standing up and saying like, look, government, you're in the wrong. How about we not do this? And, it's essentially the government who then says, okay, fine. Yeah, you're right. Fine.
Yeah, and that's the problem that I have. That's the only problem that I have with it because she says like we shouldn't do this. We should do the right thing. And then Starfleet's like, yeah, we're all gonna die, but yeah, we should do the right thing. And they go ahead and sign off on it. Like that inversion of the paradigm makes it not the same, because if like they had said no, we're gonna do it, and she had like no choice but to either go along with it or mutiny, that would be the perfect representation of like how she has progressed. Like she's not like out to protect herself anymore. Like now Starfleet is, and she's become better than what they have descended to. That would be perfect. But she convinces them in like a minute.
But I mean, I think that you have to cut them some slack for the accelerated pace of television storytelling. But also, I think that in like everything that you're saying, like it does happen. Like she gets up to that door and knocks on it, and the Federation caves before she has to do anything really. But the fact that she did take that step, the fact that the crew did all stand up and say, we're with you, Michael Burnham, not the Federation. Like, I think that because that is the Federation, because they're the ones who actually are like, the Federation has trained them so well that now, they're through the looking glass, whatever, on the other side of this thing. And now they're the ones who are sort of like standing up for the morals which the Federation is built upon. Like the fact that all of that happens like thematically. And I mean, the idea that, Cornwell says like, okay, fine. What do you suggest? Like that doesn't, I think, diminish anything that they did, because if she's like, no, and then they're like, okay, fine, we'll fight you for it. Like that I don't think would have been of any added value to her arc, right? She's already established that she is willing to go that extra mile, and the fact that she doesn't have to, I don't think is really
that's true. It does. It wouldn't change her arc, but it would change the show's arc. It would mean that the show is directly making a statement that when power is wrong, you go against it. You rebel. You mutiny. You take your spore drive and you leave Starfleet because they have lost their way. And then maybe that would explain why they don't have a spore drive for the next 200 years.
But it wouldn't explain why the Federation is back to the the moral high ground in the original series. To me,
maybe that would take another 5-6 seasons. I don't know.
Okay,
But point
all right.
is, like, that would be a good way to handle things, and it would make a really clear statement about what the show is.
I mean,
It would
I
be
think
a
that
show about revolution and rebellion and doing what's right, no matter what.
I mean, I think that I think that it makes that point well enough. I think that doing what you're saying, it could. I'm not saying that would be bad. Like, you could do that and it would be fine. But I don't think that it's necessary in order to achieve what you're talking about here. But
I'm not saying that what they did is fundamentally bad. I'm just saying that it's a little bit easier than the more radical option, and
sure,
the more radical choice is what I expect from a Star Trek show. Like this is the crazy one. This is the one that's breaking the rules, that's doing things out of the ordinary. They have they have been swearing, and they have nudity, and they have graphic violence. Like, why can't it do something as revolutionary as say that, maybe the way to handle this is that Starfleet is wrong, and like they need to get behind what they are supposed to be about and not what they think they need to protect. Like, that would be a really great statement. And I do kind of lament that that's not what happened.
I can see what you're saying. I think that would have probably been more suited to maybe a show which was set post TNG, which is a whole other can of worms. But maybe that would be a reason to do something which it wasn't a prequel. But I mean, obviously, I think there's also sort of an urge on the creator's part to get back to sort of like what Star Trek is on a formulaic level, because obviously there's a lot of stuff which you can do with that format, and since they haven't been, using that format yet, and since they were thrown into war, kind of against their will, I mean, it's something which was inherited by them, as they've talked about in these interviews and everything, and we know that that's the case. Like, I can see them saying the idea that Brian Fuller came up with this concept, and then Brian Fuller left, and they're like, well, I guess we're doing this. Even
we're saying left now. Are we putting that in quotation marks?
However,
just trying to make sure.
Whatever you want to call it,
Okay.
Yeah.
Brian Fuller had a previous engagement, and he went off to do that instead.
Yes, American Gods. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I can see the desire to want to sort of get back to traditional Trek. I mean, obviously, I don't.
Well, there's no question that they wanted to get back to traditional Trek at the very end of the episode.
Well,
it's
yeah,
they really want to get back there.
Which is very interesting, and we'll get to that in a minute. Look at this nice little dissolve there, nice little fade as she fades out, and then you see. I mean, the thing that I like about this is she has a goal at the start of this show, just like Burnham has a goal at the start of this show, and L'Rell's goal is reunite the Klingon people, and the way that T'Kuvma thinks that should be accomplished is by going to war with the Federation, which I mean, obviously that's something which we've seen happen again and again and again throughout history. Unite people under someone by going to war with someone else, and the fact that she's able to achieve her goal, the goal which she shares with T'Kuvma, but not through violence, not through bloodshed, I think is kind of cool. And that really kind of also, I think, speaks to this finale, which, a lot of people are like, it's quiet. Like, we were expecting some sort of big epic thing, and I was expecting that too. I mean, we've seen a bunch of like space battles and everything, which have been, off the wall crazy, and here it's literally just people talking to each other and saying like, how about you don't do that? I've got a better idea. Yeah. Maybe we can do this. And I like that because, again, it's something which, isn't expected, but I think that there's also something to be said thematically for the idea that like this confrontation, this war was resolved not through some epic battle, not through a test of power, but through negotiation, through peace talks, through whatever you want to call them.
Holding a planet hostage.
Well, there is that.
Yeah, let's not forget that they held a planet hostage.
That is true. That is true. I mean,
the Federation way.
It's and you could also say, like the fact that the Federation did plant the bomb, and then they're like, here, Laurel, right? I mean, you could draw parallels to, placing leaders in power in, nations which you've occupied, that kind of thing, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean,
it's not great.
It's not. And maybe that is something that they'll deal with, because that's another thing. Like, I was like, okay, so this storyline is done. I guess I was right that Tyler is not going to be on the show next year. But then, on After Trek or whatever it is, one of the many interviews that Berg and Harberts have been giving, they're like, oh yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what happens to Tyler next year. And it's like, okay, so they are going to be on it. But they've also said like, well, we're not going to, we'll see some Klingons here and there, but we're not going to dwell on the Klingons. This isn't a war show, that kind of thing. What if they did it like season 2 of The Wire, where they just had like 2 parallel storylines which have absolutely nothing to do with each other, and then at the end of the season or something like that, they tie back together. But, the idea that you could have, half the episode devoted to just like Laurel and Tyler hanging out on Kronos, trying to reunite the houses. Brian Fuller, he seems like one of those people who is like a certifiable genius, where it's like you're working in a medium which is very much driven by economics. And he does seem like a very forceful personality who's not willing to compromise. And he has so many things going all the time that he doesn't have to settle. If he's not creatively stimulated by a project, he can just leave.
Yeah, I think it's fairly simple. When you want something to be as good as it can be, and you're trying to get it there, and it requires that you throw things out, and you change things around, and you sacrifice some of the time you spent earlier because it was a wasted investment. Like that process of investigating different avenues and exploring different ideas is part of the creative process. And the creative process can be brutal on ideas. Ideas are treated very harshly in that process. And when those ideas have dollar values attached to them, it can be pretty harrowing, I imagine. And the idea that somebody who's willing to take the risk and make those investments and then throw them out because they aren't good enough, that's pretty hardcore. And generally speaking, you need the second voice. It's sort of the producer mindset. And if they can't get him to change his mind or come to peace with it, then the only option would be to find somebody else, which is a bummer. But I also understand both sides of it. You need 2 voices. Not like a Rick Berman voice. Like maybe a Rick Berman voice. Maybe a McCallum voice. Yeah, that's not bad.
So this is where I would also say that there's sort of like a mirror in terms of the, the JJ verse iconography, the metal scene in 2009, was in a very similar environment. I even looked to see if it might be the same exact location, but it's not. But the editing in this scene is very strange because, she's finishing.
You noticed that too? I thought it was super weird. It seemed like she was done, and then no. We're going to cut back to the middle part of her speech,
right,
and hear that part.
It's like we were seeing like her finish out her speech while we were seeing this other thing happen in the same location. Very, very, very bizarre. And then,
okay, so it wasn't just me. I thought that was like very jarring and strange
because it was like intercut between not just two scenes, but
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but cut this dude a break. Just call him the captain.
I know, right? Yeah, I know. He deserves that chair, which really did surprise me when they were like, "We're going to Vulcan to pick up your new captain," and it's like, wait, really? Like you're not gonna? And then they're being so sneaky about it. You've got to think it's going to be someone noteworthy. Right? I mean, I don't really think this is just a case of like we haven't cast it yet or whatever. But who would it be? I mean, the fact that they're going to Vulcan. I mean, could it be the only person who I could think of who it could be, which is just completely out there crazy, doesn't make any sense, would be
Spock's half brother?
No, I was going to say T-Paul.
Wait, is she still alive?
Yeah, she's Vulcan. They live for a long time. It's only been like
wasn't she kind
years.
of old in that show? Wasn't she?
She was a little bit older, but I don't think she was super old.
Okay, all right. Yeah,
I think she'd still be alive.
It could be to Paul. Yeah, that'd be good. That'd be good. Oh, man.
I don't know. So here we have, the Enterprise, which I was surprised by this for sure. I did not think that they were going to go there, but they did, and there we see it modified.
Yeah,
slightly,
it looks more or less the way it did in the original series.
The struts are a little weird, though, right? Don't they go back like the movie one?
It looks totally crazy different.
I think it looks perfectly fine. I mean, what do you want it to look like, right?
Oh, I don't think it looks bad. I'm just saying it does look radically different, which I'm okay with because, I mean, my statement has always been the same, that they need to deal with how weird the original series looked and somehow come to peace with it. And I've always liked the idea that the original series was a TV show set in the history of the Star Trek universe, and that way you can justify it being off in some ways, and maybe the actors didn't have great martial arts training, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
like that way it makes sense, and it can be an accurate representation of history, but not an accurate representation of the way history looked.
Yes, I can see that. For sure. So, okay, so this episode is over with. This season is over with. Any final thoughts?
I enjoyed it. I liked it quite a bit. I just I do wish that there were there are just things that frustrated me about it, and some of them seem kind of like easily resolved.
Yeah, on the whole, I mean, I did like it quite a bit. I mean, it's as far as exactly where it falls in my love of Star Trek. It's so hard to judge because we've been living with Star Trek for our entire lives, and we've been living with Discovery for about, in its completed form, for almost exactly 24 hours as of when we're recording this. So it's hard to place that exactly. I mean, part of me really sort of like latches on to the idea that they are telling this story in a different way, formally speaking, which, both in terms of the writing and in terms of the production, value is sort of a massive leap forward in the franchise. And, in a lot of ways, I feel like it's kind of, caught up with, modern day techniques, which is something which, the shows have always had a problem with. And I think that is kind of amazing. I think that, on the whole, it's one of the best. I mean, looking at just first seasons, where do you rank this in the franchise in terms of just first seasons?
In terms of just first seasons, it's definitely the best. Like, there's no question about it. The first season of every Star Trek show is incredibly awkward. Like, I have said it before, like the only reason I didn't bail out of Next Gen is because I was 9.
Yeah, right. And you look at, of course, Next Gen in later years and, Deep Space Nine. I mean, to me right now,
Deep Space Nine started super awkward, like its episodic structure was all over the place, and like they didn't really seem to have like a plan. And like the first season of Voyager is still a stronger season than the first season of Next Gen. They keep getting better at the fundamentals. They're like a sports ball team. They're getting better at doing the game playing. And
yes, that's exactly how I would put that. Yes.
Yeah, this is elite level sports guy talk. Like, this is how they talk on the radio when they talk sports balls. And so this is like by far the best in terms of like we know how to make a television show, and there's no question. And like they know a lot of Star Trek. They're really into Star Trek, and like I have no doubt about that. And like my criticism is like if you're this good, don't do that Ash Tyler thing again.
And I wonder like how much of that, because it sounds like that was the plan from the beginning too. I mean,
and if you're going to go to the mirror universe, make it like mean something, like don't just go there to get a new character and then get rid of them. Like that was awkward.
I think it meant something, I mean, that I think was very much sort of like involved in the whole, sort of thematic thing too. You know what I mean?
Like who we are, like are we like good, are we bad, are we this, are we that, and like it did seem to all like revolve around the question of like how we behave and like who we are defines like our actions and what it means to be a decent person or an indecent person, to have a conscience or an ethical like framework for your actions and that kind of thing. And at the same time, you didn't have to go to another universe to do that.
Well, you
had
didn't,
a character who was like representing exactly that question, and they decided to make him from the evil universe, which I think was a great twist, but it wasn't really necessary.
Maybe it wasn't necessary, but I think it was pretty effective, not just with him, but with seeing, sort of like the mirror of everything that we've seen. In the same way that the mirror universe has always worked. Like I've said, I've always been a big fan of the mirror universe. I know a lot of people hate it, but I've always liked it a lot. And I don't know. I think they use the mirror universe better here than it ever has been before. Well, we've come to the end of this journey, and I just want to thank a few people before we go. First off, our associate producers, of course, Norman C. Lau, Tony Robinson, Thomas Puleo, Lisa Slack, Shoaib Mirza, Richard Rutledge, James Muldrow, Cornelia Reutner. Thank you very much for all of your support, and we couldn't do it without you. Secondly, of course, Christopher Jones for, allowing us to play on this network and give our opinions, for giving us a voice. That's really cool. My co-hosts from the other Edge shows, Amy Nelson and Brandon Shea Matala, thank you very much for all of the work that you've done and for all of the support that you've given us. And a couple of people who worked on the show, who did a couple of episodes early on Tracks from the Edge, Sarah Buck and Justin Ozer. Thank you very much for stepping in and commentating on here. But yeah, as the few people who listen to Stage 9 may be aware of, that show is ending, and I'm going to be stepping away from this show too. since the season's over with. So, I mean, hey, I've been on Trek FM for like 5 years, done a lot of crazy things with From There to Here and Stage 9 and everything. But Max, we started, on the network here together with Commentary Trek Stars. And, that was 5 years ago. And before that, we had our own podcast. But before that, we've been talking about Star Trek for like 18 years at this point, And
yeah, it's about 18 years. Yeah. Well, I think if you go all the way back, it's probably before we remember that we knew each other.
Yeah, I mean, you probably said something, and I was like, "What? What is wrong with you?" And then I moved on with my life. I mean,
Yeah.
but once we started working together, and once we were, locked, in a booth together for, every Thursday night for, like a decade, you're going to start having conversations, and, those conversations are inevitably going to be about Star Trek. And, I was a Star Trek fan before I met you, but like talking to you about Star Trek, hearing your crazy opinions, whether or not I agreed with them, it really sort of put my fandom through the ringer. And
that's how I like to think of myself.
And when it came out, when I came out the other side, like what I found was a better understanding of what my fandom was, but also like a better understanding of what it means to be a fan. And like my opinion of Star Trek now is completely shaped by those conversations. And here we are, now we're finally getting to talk about new Star Trek, and the fact that we're still able to have that conversation, and I'm able to have, my thoughts about new Star Trek challenged by yours is pretty awesome. And,
it's definitely awesome.
I don't think that there's anyone in the world who I would rather talk to about Star Trek than you. So thank you for doing this with me. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun.
Same for me.
So, yeah. Thanks everyone for listening, and
yes, thank you.
We'll talk to you again in the future, right? The human adventure is just beginning.